speaker to be the first to ask a question.
Okay, Honorable Kinyanjui, I just have 3 related questions. One is that, as you know, in the past 10 years, the manufacturing sector in Kenya has remained stagnant at 11% of our GDP. If approved, what measures will you put in place to promote the growth of the local manufacturing sector? Also, there is the challenge of the influx of substandard counterfeit and contraband products into the local market through various border points, and this has reduced also the market share of locally manufactured goods. Again, I'd like to know the strategies that you'd put in place to curb that. Also, scrap metal industry in Kenya meets a huge demand in both the local and international markets, and it contributes to about 0.6% of Kenya's exports. If approved, what policies will you implement to ensure that this trade grows, but also strike a balance with safeguarding against vandalism? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Allow me to start by looking at the question of manufacturing in the lens of the sessional paper number 10 by the then Minister for Commerce, Dr. Gikonyo Kiano, in 1963, and the plan to make Kenya an industrial hub, encourage Africanization, and more importantly, protect our markets from external flooding by the developed and industrialized nations. But, Mr. Chairman, I want to confirm that in spite of that great dream, not much of it has been achieved. It is true that the contribution of manufacturing to GDP is in the range of about 7, which remains low even compared to some of our neighbors within the broader Africa region. And therefore, Mr. Chairman, it will be important for us as we get into this critical office to look at the foundational causes of why manufacturing has remained low. And I want to start by saying the first one, I think, is our mindset. And I say this with the full knowledge that very few of our students will go to school in the hope of owning an industry one day. They can dream of anything else, but industry is not one of those things we have taught our people to imagine or think they would ever want to get into. So therefore, it will be important, first of all, to try and work on the psychology of our people to make them understand that where the money is not in the primary extraction, but in the value addition that we find in industry. Secondly, the issue and the cost of energy remains a big issue. We have the cost of energy being among the 4th most expensive in the whole of Africa, and therefore if we are producing to go and compete with other products from other parts of Africa, leave alone even other parts of the world, then we are already disadvantaged. Yet we know industries are heavy consumers of energy. We need to work closely together with the Ministry of Energy to find ways of reducing the costs. But I think more importantly, Mr. Chair, is to look at the elephant in the room, which is basically energy agreements that were signed a long time ago that continue to put our energy at extremely irrational levels, thereby making manufacturing in Kenya very difficult. We are aware that there are some companies that have moved to other countries where the cost of energy is lower, and therefore I don't think it is a matter that we would want to postpone, because it's very urgent. And most of the young people whom we see out there who are restless, most of them have done courses that would be absorbed in these industries. So as long as the industries are not growing at the level that we would want, then we are likely to continue experiencing this. Then lastly, our trade agreements and other engagements with partners, which means that through the EAC, through other multilateral agreements, sometimes we have ended up getting the last side of the agreement, meaning therefore we don't protect our industries. There's flooding, and that has been a major challenge that has seen most of our industries wiped out. Allow me also to say, closely related to this, is that we have not been able to come to the aid of our factories and industries when they're in problems. And therefore, you find that some of them go through foreclosure and others. Yet, there are many other situations across the world when companies are facing financial constraints, including GM in the US in the year 2008. The government came and saved them. Today, it remains a very big company to date. But we have had some of our bright companies, whenever they fall into trouble, they go into foreclosure, and it becomes very difficult to revive them in future. Therefore, I also want to take this opportunity to ask the House to consider how we can be able to protect our industries, because once they go down, coming up is impossible. And a good example is Kenatco, which is over 20 years into receivership. Allow me to mention also on the issue of counterfeits. Yes, it is true that a lot of them manufacturers face the serious problem of having other people manufacture using their brands without their knowledge, and therefore diluting the investment of the original investors. I think there is an already existing authority that takes care of this, and I think our work will be to work together with other state agencies, including enforcement, to ensure that it does not continue to affect our industries adversely. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, is the issue of scrap metal and how we can ensure that our exports are supported. I want to say that any country that exports scrap metal should really reconsider its policies. How can you export scrap metal instead of just melting it and making it, iron bars for construction and all that? So the idea of exporting scrap metal is a suicide note for a country that seeks to industrialize itself. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Majority.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And may also note, Honourable Speaker, that I've known the Honourable Kinyanjui for quite some time, since he was a member of Parliament, and he's been a friend. But that will not deter me from vetting him. And CS nominee, I want to know, from where I sit, we see a lot of disharmony, or there being lack of harmonization of what is seen to be government policy in the Ministry, especially of Industry, and what happens in practice. And because we seem to be having a protectionist policy in the Ministry, especially around local manufacturers. And I have in mind the specific case of the steel and cement industries, where policy has been seen to be protecting local manufacturers, those who have invested heavily in the industry. But at the same time, in practice, the ministry also proposes certain other legislative measures that negate the policies that you espouse. What do you intend to do, should you be approved, to harmonize both policy and legislation? And I say that because specifically on cement and steel. For instance, we want to encourage the growth of local industry in the steel sector with heavy investments by particular players in the country. But legislation then comes to Parliament that in a way is also killing small industrialists. And you find that you are protecting the very big industrial setups, but also killing cottage industries. Look at the people who are smelting the scrap metal you're talking about, and those who are processing iron ore to steel. Look at those who are manufacturing mabati, iron sheets, and wire rods. And the legislation around it and what the ministry espouses as government policy. I therefore just want to hear what your views are on a protectionist policy in government of industry vis-a-vis the encouragement of young and nascent cottage industries in the country. Because big industries, yes, create jobs, but also the cottage industries probably create much more jobs than those big, very big mega industries. Just your views on that, CS nominee, and how you will harmonize both policy and legislation.
Jeanette. Lee will take several so that you can answer them together. Junet, you will skip posing.
Thank you, Chairman. Honorable Chairman, there's something notable about nominees from Nakuru which I want to bring to the attention of the nominee. We have vetted 3 people from, this is the 3rd person from Nakuru, Honorable Chairman. We are vetting in less than 2 years, or 2 years exactly. And at the moment we vet somebody, and I want the Honorable Kinyanjui to know this, when we finish vetting that person, we approve. Then 1 month down the line, if you ask who is the Minister for ICT, nobody remembered her. I'm telling you. Nobody even remembered whether there was a Minister of ICT. Then the first man who went to lunch, there was a problem. So Honorable Kinyanjui, are you going to be part of the same? Was that a fate? But my question is, Honorable Kinyanjui, this idea of economic zones has been criticized by some critics and given a proposal which I want to know what is your thinking about it. They are saying, rather than having those economic zones in counties, that you as a minister now coming